Thank you. It's good not to be muted. Well, I'll repeat a little bit of what I said. Wasn't anything very important. Just that I am happy to be here. As Steve said, I was looking forward to a reunion at Darmfield with old and new friends and being in that wonderful space again. But with this Delta variant, I didn't feel it was the best idea. So anyhow, in whatever form, I'm glad to be with you today. It's always a pleasure. So while searching for a topic for this talk, I decided to read translations of Chinese and Japanese poems influenced by Zen from a marvelous anthology called The Poetry of Zen, which we'll do show and tell here. Published by Shambhala, edited and translated by Sam Hamill and J.P. Seaton. It's a wonderful book. As I read these poems, I realized they were offering me a kind of refuge from the brutal news cycle and all the difficult times we're facing on a daily basis. I decided I would like to share this refuge with others. Now, I don't mean we should always avoid the news, even if it's very painful. But if we get too lost in suffering, we'll lose our way and become embittered or cynical. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, life has two faces, the face of suffering and the face of the beauty and wonder of the world. We need to be in touch with both without getting lost in either. Now, the poems I'm dealing with today are, of course, in translation. I don't read Chinese or Japanese, so I have no way of knowing the originals. So for the sake of the discussion, I'll be treating these translations as if they are original English language poems. Now, I'll begin with a poem by the 8th century poet Wang Wei, lived from 701 to 767, Common Era. According to the Shambhala Anthology of Chinese Poetry, Wang Wei, quote, was a child prodigy as a musician, the innovative founder of a Zen-influenced school of landscape painting, and an important patron of Zen itself, unquote. Wang Wei is considered one of the three greatest Chinese poets, along with his contemporaries, Li Bo, who we'll look at later, and Du Fu. I might mention that all of these three poets lived in the Tang Dynasty, which is considered a golden age of Chinese poetry and the golden age of Zen in China. So these poems are all very short, and I know you don't have copies in front of you, so I'll read them twice. This one is called Visiting the Mountain Hermitage of a Monk at Gonwa Monastery. He waits as at dusk, bamboo walking stick in hand, at the headwaters of Tiger Creek, leading us on as we listen to mountain echoes, following the water's way. Patches of wildflowers bloom. A solitary bird calls from the valley floor. We sit evening zazen in the empty forest. Quiet pine winds bring the scent of autumn. So I'll read that one more time. Visiting the mountain hermitage of a monk at Gonwa Monastery. He waits as at dusk, bamboo walking stick in hand, at the headwaters of Tiger Creek, leading us on as we listen to mountain echoes, following the water's way. Patches of wildflowers bloom. A solitary bird calls from the valley floor. We sit evening zazen in the empty forest. Quiet pine winds bring the scent of autumn. A beautiful poem, I think. By Wang Wei. Just to mention, I know almost all of you will be familiar with this term, but some of you may not. He mentions zazen, which I'll be using in the talk too, which simply means sitting meditation. It's a kind of thing we do at Dharma Field and really in almost all traditions of Buddhism. So first of all, the title of the poem gives us the poem's context. A group of people, perhaps Buddhist pilgrims, are visiting a monk at the monk's hermitage, which is part of a monastery in the mountains. The poem presents us with a succession of images of the natural world. We have dusk, Tiger Creek, mountain echoes, patches of wildflowers, solitary bird, the valley floor, the empty forest, pine winds, the scent of autumn. A rich array of images. But the poem begins with the human world as we find the monk that the speaker and his companions are visiting, waiting, quote, as at dusk, unquote. I found it interesting that the poet doesn't say it is dusk, but rather that the monk waits as if it were dusk. Now, dusk is a time of day when our daily activities wind down and we start looking forward toward night and sleep. So waiting as at dusk suggests a quiet, calm waiting and gives us an entrance into the calm space of the mountain hermitage. Notice that the monk is not described or even named. The human world is relatively unimportant in this setting. You may have seen this too, but I've seen a lot of Chinese paintings that depict huge landscapes, and then there's a tiny human figure or a human habitation sort of stuck in there, just minor in this magnificent landscape of mountains and forests. In the next image, we find that the monk has a bamboo walking stick in hand. Stick is being used by a human, but as bamboo, a natural material. We begin to transition into the natural world. Next, we find that the monk has been waiting for his visitors at the headwaters of Tiger Creek. In China, tigers symbolize power, energy, illumination, good luck, among other things. By mentioning the name of the creek, the poet evokes the sense that their journey is fortunate and one of power and illumination. We have now entered the natural world, the monk's environment. We find ourselves at a place of beginnings, of origin, as it is the headwaters of the creek. As the monk leads them on, the travelers listen to mountain echoes. Echoes of what? Perhaps echoes of the stream, of their steps, of their voices. They're not only experiencing the visual joys of the world, but the auditory ones as well. It also creates a strong, strong image of their surroundings, walking by a stream in the midst of mountains. Excuse me. Then we learn that not only did they begin their journey at the headwaters of Tiger Creek, but that to reach their destination, they are following the water's way. This phrase is rich with meaning. First, it tells us they're not following a human-made road or path, but the natural path of water. Second, it suggests following a natural path, water's way. Water is an image important in Taoism, a philosophy / religion pervasive in Chinese culture. Water is key in Taoism because it's flowing, flexible, going around obstacles and eventually wearing them down, and going with rather than fighting gravity. The travelers are moving with the natural flow of the earth of life as they walk onward. At the beginning of the second stanza, we get two natural images, patches of wildflowers and a solitary bird calls. These images are a bit quieter than the ones in stanza 1 of flowing water and echoing mountains. The poet doesn't show us whole fields of wildflowers, but only patches, isolated groupings. The call is of a solitary bird, a single one, not a flock or even two answering each other, and it's distant from the valley floor. The poet is moving us inward as the poem progresses. Then, amidst all this natural beauty and wonder, we find the group sitting evening zazen. The poem has led us to this point, taking us deeper into the natural world and into the mountain hermitage, away from the busyness and distraction, deeper into ourselves until we have settled into the quiet space of sitting meditation. We haven't left the natural world, transcended it, but deepened into ourselves who are part of this world, not separate from it. Wang Wei still locates us in nature, the empty forest. Now, of course, the forest isn't empty in the usual sense. There are trees, flowers, birds, animals, insects. I think what the phrase suggests is, first of all, that the forest is empty of other human activity. Second, it perhaps suggests the Buddhist understanding of empty of separate self, of substance, as the sitters find barriers vanishing, and they and the forest are woven together in the fabric of life. The final line brings in the sense of smell to go along with the senses of sight and hearing we've already experienced. Quiet pine winds bring the scent of autumn. I find it interesting that the poet merges pines with winds in the phrase pine winds. After all, they're only separate in our discriminative consciousness. Wind rises and falls just like the breath of the group sitting zazen, perhaps following their own breath. These pine winds bring the scent of autumn. Here the poet takes us to another dimension of the experience. Sitting zazen, as most of us know, all sorts of thoughts and feelings arise. So the scent is not only of pine. The scent of pine brings us autumn, a time of transition from the bounteous world of summer to the stark world of winter. This may then suggest awareness of mortality and impermanence. In the poem up until now, we've experienced the face of life that is beauty and wonder. The last image reminds us that this face contains the face of impermanence, of facing our mortality. In our practice, we reject nothing. We don't avoid suffering. We work with it to transform it. It's of the natural world, and that it's not shown as threatening or fearful, just as the scent of pine is neither threatening nor fearful. The beauty of the natural world and our seeing that we are an intimate part of it allows us to accept our deaths as a natural part of our lives. This poem, excuse me, this poem is a wonderful vehicle to bring us back to our true self, moving us into a meditative space, into deep insight and connection. Just as the travelers take refuge in the mountain Hermitage, the poem becomes a kind of refuge for us. It points to the middle way, not being lost in the world of form, but not rejecting it either. Nature is a source of nourishment, not replacing our practice, but supporting it. Reading and then rereading a number of times, this poem settled me down. It took me out of my anxieties about my life, about the world, and brought me back to my true self. It doesn't suggest I ignore suffering, but that I recognize I have a place of refuge available to me at all times. Renewing ourselves, returning to silence and the source is crucial if we are truly to help alleviate suffering and not bring more suffering into the world. And the next poem I'd like to look at is by Li Bo, 701 to 762, and really an exact contemporary of Wang Wei. And he is often considered the greatest of all Chinese poets. Again, according to the Shambhala anthology, he was, quote, born and raised in China's western borderlands, studied the art of swordsmanship, while he also mastered the civil arts of poetry and philosophy in a Taoist monastery during his youth. Perhaps the world's first cultural superstar. It's interesting to think about a superstar in Tang Dynasty China. He composed verses on the spot to please an emperor or to settle a bar bill. He was a notable drinker, and he does have poems, quite a few, I think, about his drinking. This one is not one of them. So here's his poem. And again, I'll read it 2 times. Zazen on Qingding Mountain. The birds have vanished from the sky. Now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. Zazen on Qingding Mountain. The birds have vanished from the sky. Now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. From the title, we know that the speaker is engaged in zazen, sitting meditation. This puts us on notice that we should read the poem in the light of sitting zazen. The Wang Wei poem involved a group of people sitting. In Li Bo's poem, we have a solitary person. The poem begins with natural images, a mountain, birds, clouds. These natural images reflect the inner state of the speaker. It's difficult, if not impossible, to talk directly about what is happening inside us. I think we can all recognize that. I know when I get all the teachings I've had, very good teachings over the years about sitting and what happens when you sit and what you should do, very helpful, essential. But I notice too that when I'm sitting, it doesn't quite correspond to exactly what's happening. So we really can't describe those things. So we turn to concrete things such as natural phenomena to give us some access to what another is experiencing via metaphor and symbol. And the natural world is a perfect fit for talking about Zazen. So our life is intimately connected to the life of the planet and the cosmos. So we begin with birds. Birds are invoked by the use of that word, but then we are told they have vanished. First there were birds, now they've vanished. Vanish suggests an almost magical disappearance, as a magician may make an object vanish. Vanish also feels like an effortless disappearance, not forced or violent, almost beyond our notice. The next line shows us that the last cloud drains away. As with the birds, there were clouds, but now the final one remaining drains away, dissipates in a natural, unforced manner. We might imagine it slowly drifting out of sight, or perhaps being broken up by air currents. Since we know that the speaker is sitting zazen, both the image about the birds and the one about the cloud suggest a deepening of the meditative state. Birds and clouds could suggest thoughts and feelings, the usual fleeting contents of our minds that flow incessantly in our daily lives. Birds and clouds are appropriate images for the ephemeral nature of our world. Both are in the sky, which has been used as an image for our naturally open, clear minds. Birds tend not to stay in the same place for long, and if approached, quickly fly away. Clouds are the most ephemeral of all, having little solid substance, always changing and moving. Our normal way is to give our thoughts and feelings a solidity they don't really have, to follow them, ride the waves up and down, and ignore the true nature of ourselves and the things of the world. This is samsara, the grip the world has on us. Because we take these ephemeral thoughts and feelings as reality, we grasp at them, either wanting to pull them to us and hold them, or push them away from us, attraction and aversion. But our practice is to step back and see these mental phenomena for what they are. We do this most fundamentally through our sitting meditation. We're instructed to follow our breath, letting thoughts and feelings come and go. When we realize we are lost in thought, we return to our breath. If our concentration is good, thoughts and feelings settle down. In the poem then, the first two lines give us images of the speaker's mind becoming calm and quiet. Even if the birds and clouds are in the actual sky still there, they are no longer a distraction for the speaker. In the same way, our thoughts and feelings don't necessarily vanish, but they come and go without our grasping them. With distractions quieted, we sit together, the mountain and me. Speaker feels the mountain is not an indifferent natural object, but has a personal, friendly feeling about it, as if it's a meditation companion. And it is. When the Buddha had his great awakening, he said, "I and all beings in the great earth simultaneously attain the way." If the speaker is meditating, so is the mountain. But the final line goes even deeper, until only the mountain remains. All remainders of separation have vanished. The idea of separate self has vanished or drained away, like the birds, like the clouds. The world has not vanished, though. The mountain remains. Our relationship to all phenomenon is like this. It is we who create a separation between ourselves and a supposed outside world. If we look carefully, we can catch ourselves interposing an I, a self, even though there is no need for one. We set up an artificial barrier. Now the speaker has seen through the I, and it has dropped away of itself effortlessly, just like the birds in cloud did. The dropping away of the idea of self could occur with any phenomenon. Why a mountain? For one, a mountain appears as large, immovable, solid. Sometimes we are told to sit like a mountain, solid and immovable. Katagiri Roshi, who some of you know who he is, he was Steve Hagen's teacher, and it's someone I had some contact with. Katagiri Roshi used to come to my Eastern philosophy class once a year to talk about Zen. He would come to my house first to wait for me to return home and walk with him to class. That was our little ritual. I remember him sitting on our couch, legs crossed under his robe. I had the feeling I was seeing a mountain sitting on my couch. It was really interesting. I remember when I first read this poem, I was blown away. The final line took me by surprise, a kind of awakening. And it is a kind of awakening to our deep connection to the so-called outer world, which is not separate from our so-called inner world. It is a delight to return to that understanding, what we've always known but forgotten. So as in the Wang Wei poem, we are led by the poet into the process of Zazen via the natural world. One of the things I love about Zen is that it doesn't turn away from the world, but roots itself in our everyday lives. Final poem is from Japan, written hundreds of years after the poems by Wang Wei and Li Po, written by the 15th century Zen master Ikkyu. Wang Wei was a student of Zen, and Li Po was dedicated to Zazen, but neither was a monk and a Zen master like Ikkyu. So this poem has a different feel to it that reminds us of another facet of our practice. Ikkyu was quite a character. It's really interesting to read his poems and to read about him. He was wild and eccentric. He was a Zen master. He gave himself the name Crazy Cloud. As a Zen master, he was tough and iconoclastic, rejecting Zen orthodoxy, and also indulging in sex. And he has a lot of poems about that too. Yet he was well respected for his insight and even became abbot of a monastery late in life. His poem is Untitled. At a way station, returning from drizzly road to always dry road, if it should rain, it will rain. If the wind should blow, it blows. At a way station, returning from drizzly road to always dry road, if it should rain, it will rain. If the wind should blow, it blows. I can't help smiling every time I read that poem. It's, I don't know if you found it amusing from hearing it, but I certainly do continually find it amusing. So this poem points to an awakened understanding of life that we can realize through Zazen and mindful practice. Poem begins with the speaker at a way station. A way station is a stopping point on a journey, often a station between two principal stations. We understand from this that the poet is on a journey and at a temporary stopping place. The next two lines give us the nature of the speaker's journey. He is returning from Drizzly Road and going back to Always Dry Road. I find EQ's characterizations of these roads amusing. Going somewhere there's always a drizzly rain, soaking you to a place where you can be free of rain. The amusing names tell us that the places EQ is talking about are not actual roads, but inner places. It appears that the speaker is at a midpoint between extremes, always drizzly and always dry. The Buddha's way is the middle way, neither grasping nor pushing away. Mindfulness itself is the middle way, aware of phenomena, but neither grasping them nor pushing them away. So the speaker is at a stopping point. He'll go on, but for now he has ceased activity. Our Zazen is a stopping. We cease our daily routines. We cease engagement with worries, concerns, deadlines, appointments, and just sit and do nothing but be aware. We can stop amidst our daily activities as well. Stop our clinging to an endless stream of thoughts and emotions by being aware, mindful of what is actually going on. If, say, we're washing dishes, we can stop indulging in the stream of thoughts and feelings and just come back to washing dishes, the task at hand. Speaker has stopped and is mindfully aware of the moment. This awareness leads to the final two lines. If it should rain, it will rain. The wind should blow, it blows. While these lines seem to simply state the obvious, of course, if it's raining, it's raining. In this context, they point to a way of being in the world radically different than our usual way. Our usual way is to make judgments about what is happening according to our own likes and dislikes. If we have planned a picnic, we don't like the rain. We may not consider, say, that a farmer who desperately needs rain for his crops is happy about the rain. The awakened do not give way to selfish likes and dislikes. If it rains, it rains. If it blows, it blows. If unpleasant feelings arise, that's what we work with. There's no use in not wanting what is already there. As the Zen teacher, Reb Anderson, has said, quote, once we realize that there is no alternative to the present moment, we are on the path to Buddhahood, unquote. These lines show EQ challenging our usual egoistic ways of thinking in an amusing way. It seems as if he's almost saying, in modern parlance, duh, if it's raining, it's raining. What's your problem, dude? I laughed when I first read this poem. It felt liberating. It is liberating to see that we don't have to use our mental energy in futile attempts to deny what is. These attempts we make, trying to mentally shape the world to suit our self-centered desires, are what the Buddha called dukkha, first noble truth, truth of suffering. Our practice is to be mindful of these needless and frustrating mental efforts, to see through them and then to stop. In this short, simple poem, EQ has pointed us to the essence of the practice. He sees that both Drizzly Road and Always Dry Road are both part of life, part of our ongoing practice. But we don't need to be distressed about that. All three of these poems are inspiring reminders, pointing us in the direction of true practice and providing a refuge by bringing us back to our true home. In Wang Wei's poem, we journey with a group of practitioners into a solitary, beautiful landscape, mirroring a journey inward into meditation. In Li Po's poem, we also take an inward journey, but this time as a solitary practitioner. EQ's poem is a wake-up call from a Zen master, calling us to see things as they are and cease creating suffering for ourselves and others. I might add that the act of writing a poem, especially poems like these, is an act of stopping and of focusing and perhaps gaining some insight and sharing it. So all these poems were written centuries ago. They are timeless as the water, the mountains, the rain, wind, and sky that they image for us, and point to the fact that the practice of Zazen is also timeless. All three poems point to stopping, Zazen, mindfulness, as a starting point. If we can stop and, quote, let go of the stream of distress, unquote, as Thich Nhat Hanh puts it, let go of our holding to likes and dislikes, of our attachments to things of the world. We open ourselves to both a way to deal with suffering and a way to fully enjoy the beauty and wonder of life. Thank you. So I guess I'll take questions if there are any, or comments.
Great job. Love the poems.
Thank you.
I'm amazed that so much wisdom can be captured in so few words.
Yeah, it is. It is amazing, isn't it? It's a great gift to us.
I wanted to thank you, Warren, for the talk. I've been thinking about that Li Po poem for most of the past week, actually. And, Li Po actually, I think, is the poet of Mahler's Song of the Earth.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right. I'm sure you are.
Mostly the drinking songs.
Huh.
But were at least one of the great ones. But anyway, I'm just fascinated by that image of communing with the mountain and then dissolving somehow. I mean, it's fascinating to me. I thought you just spoke beautifully about it, and about the other poems. So I want to thank you.
Thank you very much.
Lipo reminds me a bit of Leonard Cohen, a more contemporary drinking poet, right? Of course, Leonard is all about love, so it's inevitable that will be the subject of his poems. But I really like this, the first verse of Love Itself describes, I think, an episode of meditation on Mount Baldy. And I sang this for my mother when she was having a real hard time settling down, very old. And she was quiet for quite a while. The first verse goes, the light came through the window, straight from the sun above. And so inside my little room, there plunged the rays of love. I'll try to say a little more. Love went on and on until it reached an open door. Then love itself was gone.
Thank you for that. Beautiful.
Warren, this is Yasu. Thank you for inviting us on this particular presentation. I'm always amazed, I think, when you see the miracle, when you see anything in the nature, there's always a miracle of the nature we see. Sometimes we don't have those poet eyes to interpret the meaning of the miracle, I am always, I think, grateful to the people who can write this kind of poem and try to make us understand the miracle of, life. Thanks for inviting.
Thank you, Yashu. You're right. Poems can open our eyes to see things in a new way, or to really see things, not just pass over them.
I would continue that thought, Dad, is that when you talk about a clear mind as an open blue sky, that visual really hit home. And I can think of all the times I've looked up at a blue sky aspirationally now, thinking that that's how my open mind could be. And so that was just beautiful to hear.
Thank you, Neha. Yeah, I didn't invent that, but it is beautiful.
Yes, it's beautiful to just hear it and be reminded how beautiful that can be.
Yes, thank you.
Well, in the hustle and bustle of all the life, we have the responsibilities, I think, particularly at the age below 60 or 65, you don't have time or I think, interest to see this thing, but now we all, I can see, well, we all have empty of time and experience to experience this miracle. I think, that's a part of the life, we have to enjoy and accept it,
Yes. It's good to slow down and take a look. As the cliche goes, stop and smell the roses.
Exactly.
Thanks to everyone for coming and listening, and I appreciate that. Thanks to Dharma Field for inviting me. And I always, as I said, I always appreciate that and enjoy being with you. And someday in Dharma Field itself, back home, so to speak. I hope so. I think I know so. It'll happen. Thank you. Thank you all.